Welcome to Story Ray. I'm Marlon, and today on this episode, I'm going to be talking about One Battle After Another, Paul Thomas Anderson's latest film. This is not a film review, but it is some things to think about from a perspective you probably haven't considered. Stay tuned. I watched the movie One Battle After Another, and I wasn't going to talk about it. I haven't noticed a lot of other people doing videos mentioning the things that I saw. I'm not here to say it was a bad movie or that it was poorly done in any kind of way, but watching it really took me back when I was back in college, and I used to argue with the film professors at school, because one of the main films that they would use as an example of the feature film, and that was Birth of a Nation. That film from D.W. Griffith in 1915, I believe. That's not to say that Paul Thomas Anderson, the director of One Battle After Another, not to say that he is in any way as much of a racist as D.W. Griffith was. That's not the point. The propaganda in that film is blatantly anti-black, which is the purpose of the film. It was propaganda for the Ku Klux Klan. And, when you're college age, everything offends you, and people tend to be very militant about things. And so I used to always argue about how can they show this film in the 90s? That's when I went to school. And the argument was the Birth of a Nation was the birth of the modern film. And he was to be admired for his innovation in terms of storytelling, because the film was very influential. Influential is basically an understatement. I mean, that film had terrible damaging effects on the psyche of many, many people. But it also highlights the power of cinema, and that was heralded as the first quote unquote feature film. But I took another film class in the African American Studies program. And it was a film on black cinema, history of black film. And the very first day, the very first film we had to watch was Birth of a Nation. And, I was kind of surprised that we had to watch that film, and the professor made us sit through it. We had to understand, it was like an anchor for where and why cinema in and of itself, it was designed to be, or born out of, as in Birth of a Nation, it was born out of racial inequality. And to this day, cinema is a place where racial inequality still thrives. And it was built on that. It says a lot in 2025, in this day and age, go out of your way to make sure there are the revolution, so to speak, is all black women, but there are no black males. Where are they? Right? Who's missing in that movie? When you watch the movie, you say, why are they missing? Where's the black males? Not that Paul Thomas Anderson should probably be tackling that subject anyway. It's just kind of using people for your entertainment. Right? Because the story, what does the story really say? It says some things about Paul Thomas Anderson that, it says some things about our larger culture, the fact that there was this huge blind spot that people are like, oh yeah, it was such a great movie. They never stop to think, who's missing? Or why are we objectifying women of color in a way that we wouldn't do that with women of other backgrounds, right? And we're doing that in 2025. And people aren't seeing that, right? There's a blind spot, really? I don't know. And one of the problems with using a film like Birth of a Nation as somebody's upset about it too, like I am. But one of the problems with using a film like Birth of a Nation as the example or as the basis for film schools, that means that a whole generations of filmmakers are all being influenced by that movie. And if you can sit through that movie and then you watch a cross section of Hollywood movies, and I was surprised to see certain scenes from Birth of a Nation. I think when I haven't seen it in a long time, one of the quote unquote heroes is fighting a group of brown people. And he's got this bullwhip and he's just beating them all one after another, a whole group of them. And then we saw a scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark, one of my favorite movies, and I had no idea, like side by side, the two scenes look like they could be from the same movie. If, minus one is in color, one is black and white and things like that. But the influence over the film industry, when you use art from a different era where things were different, like racially, so to speak, and use that as the basis at schools like all across the country. So it's going to have an influence on a whole generation. And then you can see it in the current media. When it comes to movies and media, TV, television, and news, since we are a pluralistic society, meaning we have people from all kinds of backgrounds, everybody should have access to media in a way to express their voice. It shouldn't be one small group of people who have the power to decide what the culture sees and thinks of itself, right? Because then everything is filtered through that one paradigm, one mindset. And the thing about our culture is we have so many different points of view. And the unfortunate thing about the way the media and entertainment in this country, the way it's structured, is everything is filtered through this one very narrow point of view. That's not to say that people of other backgrounds are not allowed to express their voices, but even then, it's filtered through a certain perspective, which brings me back to the Paul Thomas Anderson film, One Battle After Another. That film really reminded me of the importance of having multiple perspectives represented in the media. So I'm not saying Paul Thomas Anderson's perspective is not important. It's a good film in terms of the technical aspects. The acting is excellent. The directing is very good. But there's certain things that have to do with a filmmaker's perspective that are problematic with that film. But for many people, it's fine. And so I'm not saying that film shouldn't have been made or those types of films shouldn't exist. I'm saying in addition to that, we need other perspectives, because for so long, since the beginning of Hollywood and movies in this country, one perspective has been the only one that we mostly see. Now, here and there's going to be exceptions. We get other people that break through and get their voices out there. In 2025, to see a movie like One Battle After Another, it's such a narrow perspective. Now, if that movie came out 20 years ago, 40, 50, maybe in the 80s, it might be more deserving of this talk that's going around. It barely got out there, and they're already talking about awards and whether or not this is the front runner for an Oscar. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. And I realized that a huge segment of our society also share the same blind spots as Paul Thomas Anderson. And they're blind spots because people they don't even see it. They're like, oh, that was the best film ever or of the year. And it's like, there were some aspects of it that were very, very problematic. And they don't even see it. It never even registered. It's not because they're bad people. It's just we're not exposed enough to alternate perspectives. So when someone like Paul Thomas Anderson puts out a movie, people get used to that one perspective, that one point of view becomes quote unquote the norm. It's not the norm because we have such a varied, diverse society. And if we don't have more diverse perspectives, then we're going to continue to have these blind spots. And with films like One Battle After Another, because, again, as someone who has studied history a little bit, I was reminded in that movie about the slavery. White males had access to black females at will. They would do a lot of their fantasies, their sexual fantasies and strange behavior and things that deviant sexual behavior that they didn't want to do with their quote unquote wife. They would do it with the slaves, the black slave women. And so historically in this country, black women have been hyper-sexualized. I mean, almost reduced to, actually during slavery, they were property. So, I mean, in the eyes of white people. So they were sexual property. In that movie, that's how they were treated in One Battle After Another, like sexual pieces of sexual property. And here's where, I mean, I really looked at Paul Thomas Anderson, the way he moved the camera. Everything, you got to remember in film, everything is intentional. And you can say a lot of things about a lot of things not through the dialogue, but just the way you move the camera, just the way the lenses that you use, right? The way you shoot things, right? Does the camera highlight things in a way that the subject is flattering? It's flattering the subject, or in a way that's disgracing or disgraceful, or I can't think of the word right now. But anyway, if you're gonna watch the movie, or if you're gonna watch it again, really look at how the camera moves, and especially when he's shooting these women of color, right? He shoots them not like they're people, but like they're objects. Watch how the camera moves, and certain, the way it. I'm not talking about just the body parts and stuff. I mean, that's just something that people like to look at. But the camera speaks. Like this is a person, or this is an object. It's degrading. That's the word I was looking for before. The way he shot that film, the way he shot those women of color was absolutely degrading. And the fact that it didn't register, they just accepted it, right? I think he was making a statement about the objectification of women as sex objects. I get it. Or would he have been able to get away with it if he had done the same thing with white women, right? There probably would have been some outrage. His perspective was very limiting. Paul Thomas Anderson's perspective on women of color was very, very limiting and limited. And that's a problem when those are like mostly the only people who are getting to make movies, or and that's why I say we have to have more perspectives. The technical way the movie was shot and stuff, yeah, it was good. Nobody's saying he's a bad filmmaker. That's not the point. Going back to D.W. Griffith, nobody's saying he was a bad technical filmmaker, but the message in his movie was horrible, right? And sometimes we can't separate the art from the message. And that's what I used to argue with those professors about. They'd say, well, just try to put it to the side, the fact that it, was about the Ku Klux Klan and it was showing black people as animals, and, just trying to forget that and see if you can learn from the techniques that he used. And I was adamantly saying, you really can't separate when it comes to film, because the whole thing about film is it is the art of telling of a message, a story, right? So you really can't separate the story or the message from the film or the art itself. And with one battle after another, that's why I can't say, well, it was technically a good movie, but I didn't like the message. No, I can't do that. I have to say, he needs to broaden his perspective, in my opinion. That's just my opinion, because it felt like a film told from a perspective of someone from maybe 40 years ago, at maybe further back than that. I don't know whether he thought he was being complimentary toward black women or women of color by including them in his movie. But the thing about film, it will betray you in terms of your intentions and what you may say one thing, but if people who realize that the whole thing is intentional, right? Every little movement, every shot, the way it's set up is intentional. It will betray your true. You may say, like, oh, look at these beautiful women of color, but the way you shoot them, you're not saying that at all, right? And then the thing about the biracial women, the closer, or once they become biracial in terms of mixed with a white parentage, the closer they become to whiteness in the movie, the more humanity they had, right? It was just, when you go back and look at it, I get it that it's a movie and it's a fantasy, and it's a fantasy world. But I can see where sometimes white men dream about a world where there are no black men, no black males. There was one, he had a white woman as his girlfriend or wife or whatever. And that was just a quick shot of a black male. So you have a film that's supposed to be about black revolution or resistance, and it's all black women, right? The black male has just been removed. And historically in Hollywood movies, you have a lot of places where black males would be that they remove them because they want the white hero to be the most dominant man on screen. And the easiest way to do that is make sure that there are no black men anywhere. It's like a white male fantasy. Hey, everybody can have their dream. I'm not knocking that. It was the type of thing that I noticed, and a lot of other people noticed who are, from my perspective, my background, similar background, that all these people who were just like, oh, this is the greatest movie, it's an awards winner, and it probably never crossed those people's mind. removed black men from the whole country. But how can you have black women and there's no black men in the space? I mean, that's like, it's a fantasy world. I get it, but what else is that trying to say, right? Best movie, I don't know, things like that, you know. I get it. It's Paul Thomas Anderson's own perspective, right? I get it. It's dangerous because they think that these movies don't influence them. Just like Birth of a Nation, people think, oh, it came out 100 years ago. It doesn't have any influence today. Oh, no. If you watch it and then you watch a cross-section of movies from each decade, and Hollywood movies from each decade, you're going to see influences from Birth of a Nation, that movie, which today people say, oh, that was terrible. And, you know, when Paul Thomas Anderson makes a movie called One Battle After Another, and removes all the black males, and the white people come out of the theater, oh my God, it was the greatest thing ever, it's the best movie of the year. You know, what's going on there, right? Something in the subconscious that people maybe they're conscious of it, but they don't give a shit. But something in the subconscious, right? Something, you know. Anyway. So back to my point on slavery. Back during those times when white men wanted to do something that was debaucherous or sexually objectifying or degrading to women, he went and did it to black women to keep his white woman more quote-unquote pristine, right? And now here we are in 2025, and Paul Thomas Anderson wants to make a movie about objectifying women sexually in a really degrading manner. And rather than have white women in that role in the movie, he goes directly to black women, and almost exclusively, right? And I heard that the book that this story was based on, the women were not black. Paul Thomas Anderson went out of his way to make them women of color because he wanted to use them in the same way that white men in the past, back during slavery, would just use black women as property, their own sexual property. The echo is too strong for 2025, right? I think that there should be some more progress. In the same manner that Birth of a Nation was heralded as this technical masterpiece, we have to give Paul Thomas Anderson credit that, you know, this film, One Battle After Another, it is pretty technically sound. It is an excellent film in that regard. But again, my old self is rejecting the message of the art, and I'm rejecting the art as a whole because of that message. The same way I did with Birth of a Nation in my younger days. Like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next one.